Revolutionary. Great big word, but don't worry, we'll spell that word. What is this principle? Intergenerational equity. It's just a great big word for fairness. Fairness. Let's spell intergenerational. INTERgenerational. Intergenerational equity. 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 It just means I would really be grateful if you students would not be talking. If you're finished talking, I will continue. If you're going to talk, you need to go outside. Intergenerational equity is about fairness. Fairness. And what is fairness? Until the end of the 20th century, society has mostly focused on the present, right now. What can I have? What can I do? What is my job? Can I have this car? Can I have this iPhone? Me. A self-centered universe. This principle is revolutionary because for the first time, society around the world is recognizing the rights of future generations. All those people who come after us, all those people who will live in Thailand 50 years from now, in China 100 years from now, in Canada 150 years from now. What about those people? This principle requires that we begin to examine the decisions that we make, and we consider carefully how the decisions of today will affect all of those people who come after us. It's a wonderful ideal. It's not very easy to make it into reality, but it's an ideal that helps us think about making good decisions today for the benefit of the people who come after us. Another principle in this story of the environment, just think of PP, 2 P's. Prevention of pollution. Prevention of pollution. By the 1970s, 1980s, countries around the world recognize a duty, an obligation, a requirement to prevent pollution. And whether we're in the US or in Mexico or in the Czech Republic, wherever we are, each country recognizes a duty, an important duty, to prevent pollution and prevent the disasters that we talked about earlier. In the 1980s, we have the perfect example of disaster. Everyone, look up at me and think about this disaster. Think about this. In 1986, there is a nuclear power plant in the Ukraine. And back then, the Ukraine is part of the Soviet Union and Russia. In the spring of that year, what happened? Does anyone know what happened? At that nuclear power plant, The staff that was running the plant decided to try an experiment. And while they were conducting that experiment, they triggered an enormous explosion. And the explosion caused the power plant to completely melt down and release into the air radioactive material, harmful materials that went around the world. Your parents or grandparents will remember this. I just happened to be in that area in 1986. I had just left Russia when this happened. The point today is this. Nuclear energy can do many, many good things, and we recognize the positive side of it. But the negative side is it is still controlled by humans, and we know that we're not perfect. And that huge accident, it was caused by people who did not understand the experiment that they were conducting. With all of that radioactive material in the atmosphere, many, many, many people were exposed to new kinds of hazards. So from that, when we think about this principle, PP, prevention of pollution, we learn there's nothing more important than making nuclear energy safe. Another principle that's very, very similar, also PP, precautionary principle. Precaution. It's just a big word for be safe, be careful. Precaution. P-R-E-C-A-U-T-I-O-N. Precaution. Precaution means be careful and be safe before there is a big accident. So if we go back to 1986, and we go back to the Ukraine, and we go back to that nuclear facility, if the staff at that facility had used precaution, they never would have conducted that experiment. They simply did not have the training. They did not have the expertise. They did not have a complete understanding of how to do that experiment. So the principle of precaution means do not engage in an important activity, and even if you don't have all the information you need, be careful, be safe, and think about the possible consequences if you did make a decision regarding an important matter, in this case, a nuclear power facility. The accident should never have happened. By the way, after all these years, do we actually know what happened truly? No, we don't. Russia never publicly released the information and documents that would show us what happened. We don't even know how many people were killed. Were there 100 people killed? Were there 5,000 people killed? There are different estimates of the number of deaths. But in a way, the principle is still the same. Whether it's 100 people dying, which is a great tragedy, or if it's 5,000 people dying, which is a great catastrophe, either way, these two principles, prevention of pollution and precautionary principle, would prevent these kinds of disasters in the future, and that is what's so important. Another principle, and we'll be talking about this more when we look at some famous cases, the duty to cooperate. The duty to cooperate. Thailand has its neighbors here, including Myanmar, Cambodia. The U.S. has its neighbors, Mexico, Canada. Around the world, France, its neighbors, Switzerland. The duty to cooperate is a principle of being good to your neighbor. And therefore, you will cooperate together to find solutions to problems with the environment. Whether it's fisheries in Thailand, clean air in Canada, clean water in Brazil, cooperating with your neighbors. Let's take a good example. In 1909, many years ago, Canada and the United States created a commission, an agency, to cooperate on protecting the lakes and the rivers that are along the border between Canada and the United States. And today, that same commission is working on current issues, water quality and climate change. The two countries don't always agree, but most of the time, Canada and the US will work to cooperate on solutions. Another example, if you buy a car in Canada